So what an AI will never give you is that kind of authenticity that comes from a creator that is creating something hopefully beautiful to show people, and that's their kind of interaction with the brand and how they think about the brand, and they're sharing that with the world. And the AI is never going to replace that.
Hi, I'm Mercedes Cardona, editor of Velocitize, and this is Velocitize Talks. I am here with Ryan Pitylak. He is CEO of Unique Influence, and we are here to talk about social influencers. So I know you wrote a piece recently about how social influencers are a wasted opportunity for marketers. Can you explain why that is and what can be done to remedy that problem?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. I wrote an article that made it onto Adweek, and I think the problem is if influencer marketing drifts towards what affiliate marketing was in the past, where people were creating content just for the purpose of getting a buck, then you kind of ruin the spirit of what influencer marketing can be about. So that's one area where I think it's a challenge that we need to make sure that we're not falling down, we don't go down that path. The second thing is, brands sometimes will have this really wonderful content that an influencer creates, but then the question is, what do you do with that content? We all know that organic reach is declining in social, and so as a result, the brand really needs to get out there and promote that content that influencer made. And part of the problem is a lot of the tactics that I see brands take today is they'll take this piece of content and show it to everybody that's in their target, but that's just not very interesting because influencers actually have influence over a certain group of people, and so you really need to connect that piece of content with people who it's going to resonate with.
Mm-hmm. We keep hearing about how the consumer is much skeptical. Millennials have this great BS detector. What does that do to influencer marketing? I mean, they know they're being marketed to via their social influencers. Won't that eventually undercut their influence?
So I'd kind of question whether or not millennials, have a good BS detector. So, they may, but in some cases, like what happened with all the fake news that went around during elections, it was really hard to tell for anybody, I think, regardless of your age. Second is that, the content that influencers create, as long as it's authentic to them and it feels authentic and it just actually is because this is something that they're passionate about, then that should come through. And so I don't think there's anything to be skeptical about because it's somebody who's creating something beautiful for the brand that they are showing their fans and showing other people. And I just don't believe that people don't want to see content like that. I think it's fun and it's interesting and it's the type of content that I would want to consume.
But you mentioned fake news,
Yep.
And there's been a lot of use and abuse of social media recently and a lot of talk about whether it's even valid and whether it should be more authenticated or controlled. And do we risk losing social media as a channel? Is it in danger of becoming kind of like spam or telemarketing where people tend to consider it a pest and ignore it rather than engage with it like we expect them to?
Yeah, well, okay, so this is a big problem. And this is like I mentioned the last thing I didn't really think is a huge problem, but this is a big one. And even Zuckerberg said this year for what he's trying to figure out for Facebook is how to solve this problem. One of the things that they've done is they have reduced the impact that content can have organically. So it's much harder for content that isn't from somebody that is in your trusted network to make it into your feed. That being said, even despite those algorithmic changes that they've made, the likelihood of this becoming a problem, especially during another election season, is high. But we just went through all this, and I think that everybody's kind of on red alert about this problem. And I'm hoping it doesn't have quite the same impact that it had in the past, and that people do have the capability to have a filter. But what it does do is it does create risk for the social platforms, because if people continue to receive content that they're not interested in, and I think there's a big difference between political content that's being shared with them, or different types of fake news. That is very different from a brand's content and the type of content an influencer would create. And hopefully this content is like visually appealing and actually resonates with them and is the type of content that they would want to see from a brand that they would love. And so I believe that as long as the platforms do a good job of keeping the bad content off and doing a much better job than they did in the last election season, then we'll be in good shape.
So speaking again of social influencers and technology, what's going to happen as more users adopt platforms based on AI and voice response like Alexa and the various others? Are social influencers going to lose some of their influence when AI is making decisions and recommendations for you based on your likes and dislikes anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I love what's happening with voice, and I also love what's happening just all around the ability to interact with an AI to get recommendations and just make your life so much easier. I have Alexa at home and a 2.5-year-old son, and so the ability to turn on Spotify easily is just amazing. But I don't think that replaces the human connection. So what an AI will never give you is that kind of authenticity that comes from a creator that is creating something hopefully beautiful to show people, and that's their kind of interaction with the brand and how they think about the brand, and they're sharing that with the world. And the AI is never going to replace that. Now, I do think that the AI will increase in its influence, but much like how I think about the decisions that I'm making along the path of buying something or going to a particular location, there are lots of signals to that. And so I think that it's another signal, but it certainly is complemented and will continue to be complemented by what true humans have to say. One other thing is that so you have this AI, but what exactly is the AI surfacing? At the end of the day, it's still surfacing human content. Like if it's saying, go to this restaurant down the street based on these reviews and maybe your behavior, well, I mean, those reviews come from humans as well. And so we're not so far afield from this reality that people desire human connection at the end of the day, and influencers will stay because of that.
Mm-hmm. And while we're in the subject of technology, what do you see as a technology poised to disrupt this area in the next 3 to 5 years? Would it be voice, or are there other things as well?
Well, so I'm very bullish on messenger bots, and the main reason is because at Unique Influence, we're a performance digital advertising agency, and so when we're advertising on social media and actually getting content out to people, the ability for that to then turn into a chat conversation that then could be automated, and you could have a personalized experience but done in an automated way, is a very scalable solution for a brand that's trying to communicate a message to a consumer. And so I think it's going to be very disruptive. It's very early and adoption is small, but there's some really smart companies making some big bets in this space. Some of the brands that we work with are starting to adopt this technology. Again, it's nascent, but I think it has a huge potential.
And since you specialize in social influence, I'd be remiss if I let you leave without giving us some tips on, what makes a good social influencer, and who are some good ones that you can think of?
Yeah, so one in particular that comes to mind is a brand that we work on is Timberland, and they just have this fantastic story, but a lot of people think about the yellow boot, but they're much more than the yellow boot. And a really kind of interesting case that happened recently was Renee Snelson, who is a graphic artist. She was tasked with finding a way to have the Timberland shoe look appealing to a woman. And she made this like fantastic graffiti art from it. And that is an example to me of connecting with what's authentic about both. So, you can't have the graffiti without Renee Snelson, and you can't have the boot without Timberland, and it comes together to create this art that then people get to see. And then that gets to be shown in all sorts of places, and social being one of the main places for that. But what ends up happening at the end of the day is it's really resonant with people. People talk about it. It tends to go a bit viral. And the brand gets a lot of value from that. And so does the artist, because they've created something beautiful that represents the shoe. And so, art can come in lots of different forms, photography, video, but or a great story. But those are the types of examples where I think if you can actually take like the art that they have along with the brand and bring that passion together to make something beautiful that tells the story, a combined story, then everybody wins, and it really looks authentic, and because it is authentic.
So thank you very much, Ryan Pitylak, for joining us today on Velocitize Talks. And please follow us on Facebook and Twitter.